Hey, horror fans, and welcome to episode 77 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week's guest is K. Michael Russell, the colorist of such horror comics as Hack/Resurrection, Glitterbomb, Yakuza Demon Killers, and Steele Versus. He graciously answered all of my ignorant questions about coloring and his process. Colorists are clearly an underappreciated portion of the comic book industry. K. Michael Russell can be found online at his official site, comiccolor.com. He also runs an online art school at 01artschool.com and a YouTube channel showing how to color comics. He's sharing his knowledge to help train the next generation of colorists. Alright, quick intro this week, so let's get right to it. Here is episode 77 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, K. Michael Russell. Oh, and I want to make sure I'm referring to you correctly. So the episodes, when they come out, they're titled with whoever the name of the guest is. So I'm assuming you'll go by your credited name, K. Michael Russell.
Correct? Yes, yeah, that's fine.
Just making sure.
And you can call me Michael for the show if you want. Okay. Honestly, in real life, my name is Kurt.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is and so Kurt Russell is really not great for CEO or SEO. Searching for Kurt Russell and trying to find me is a very difficult prospect. So I'm used to telling that story too if I need to, but yeah,
that's pretty great.
Michael's fine, but most people in the real world, they know me as Kurt,
right.
and I didn't really think about this when I originally set it up, but when I meet people in person is when it gets weird, because I didn't meet anyone, when coming up through comics. I didn't go to shows or anything, and so it was like, wait a minute. They're like, so are you K? Are you? I was like, shit, I should have thought about this a little bit more.
That's why I asked ahead of time. Let me just make sure. And even I think when I first emailed you, I said, hey, hi, K. Michael. Let me just make sure I got it covered.
Yeah, but most people do that, or just KMR or something, because they don't know what to do either. And I'm like, I don't know, just whatever. I'll answer to whatever you want to call me. So
just don't call me late for dinner, right? That's the
but it's not like I don't hide it or anything. Like I don't mind talking about it. So.
All right. Well, with your permission, that's how we're opening the show right there. So
sure.
Sure. All that's recorded. I'll just leave that one in. So what I usually start the show is asking someone to kind of pitch their book and kind of describe it. But I think I'd like to come at it from a different angle with you because of your exposure with books like Hack/ and Glitterbomb. That, I mean, how do you approach coloring a horror book? Is it different than like a Cape comic or like a different style of comic?
It's a weird thing for me because I just so happen to have done a lot of horror. Like it's not like I ever started it out thinking, oh, I want to do horror books. That's my thing. But for a lot of people and people like you that have reached out, it's like they do associate me with horror books just because I've done so many horror books and just dark books and different things. So for me, it's not really that I approach them any differently than anything else. It's almost, in a way, I've probably done more of that than anything. So I sort of I treat every project that I go into the same way, and then I try to find a style that works with the line art. And certain styles work better for different types of line art. And usually you hit your stride with an artist usually later than you want. If you're me, it's like, man, I really nailed that 7th issue of this with this guy. Like, we really killed it. So for me, as far as approaching horror, I try to stay away from just the tropes, I guess I don't know if that's the right word or not, for the just kind of the go-to super dark, super desaturated, very kind of, oh, it's horror, so it's supposed to be, dark and super moody and everything. And every book has its place, but like with Hack/, for example, that's a very colorful book. Like, I especially the new series, especially, like, I didn't want it to just be soaked in black and red and grays, and and it's because it's a very fun, it's a very light-hearted book. It definitely has its horror elements and it has the dark stuff, but I almost, for the fight scenes especially, like, wanted to just fight against that. It's like, what, we're gonna go, with really bright and fun colors, and it still works. I think when you get into the gory stuff, like I love that stuff because I try to put as much detail and make things as gooey looking as possible. I mean, so it's a fun challenge to get to come across things like that, and where it's not just spandex or it's not just coloring someone or some boring background or something. It's like, oh, I get to decide what color the inside of this guy's skull is today. Like, I mean, there's not really a manual for that. So I kind of like experimenting with each project and still, I mean, I'm relatively new at this compared to a lot of other people, the last 4, 5, 6 years. And so there's still a lot of trial and error at times where it's like, okay, this didn't work, let me try something else. And then, so I wish that I was always able to just pick the exact palette and the exact style right off the bat. But for me, there's still a lot of kind of messing around and see what works. I'm definitely not afraid of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like you're getting I would call it repeat customers with some of the books. Like you've done a bunch of Glitterbomb, you've done a bunch of Backslash. So clearly, like you're on to something in here somewhere. But quick, before
Tim likes me. Yeah, I think Tim Steele likes me. So
that's good.
He sort of was really one of my big ends into comics early on, and so I'm always appreciative to him for that.
Well, before I get too far removed from this, how would you describe the color of the inside of a guy's skull?
I don't know. I guess it depends on the book. But no, like I try to like there was a scene in Glitterbomb, Volume 2, spoiler alert, where someone's head gets like shoved through a chain link fence. Mm-hmm. Okay, and like the aftermath is like this big kind of reveal at the end of this issue, and I just like to throw around all the reds and purples and browns and all the different anything other than just blood's red. You know what I mean? Like I see a lot of books where the colorists will go with just like candy apple red blood, like regardless of the environment and what's going on. And blood does weird things, under it gets very dark under certain lights, and if it's moonlight, it looks a little bit different. So I just try to make it look cool. I mean, there's no color theory classes, I don't think, on, how to do gore, but I just try to make everything look as nasty as possible. I mean, because why not? I mean, what am I doing if I'm not doing that? So,
yeah, and I think I like that you kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to like that kind of blood splatter aspect to it, because like you can tell when it's like someone just basically poured ketchup on the page, or someone is taking the time to be like, no, this is going to look cool, this is going to look like realistic and stuff. Like it has that different kind of quality, like more like a visceral quality to it, that it looks viscous and just like on the page, and it's like
definitely, and especially with comics, like realism is, I've found, at least with color, very rarely the best way to go. Like you can do interesting things with color and to draw attention to itself and different things, which I try not to do. But realism is in color anyway is a lot more boring probably than with comics, where you're trying to it's fiction. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be hyper realistic. And so but yeah, I try to mess around with. I try to experiment a lot and see what comes out of it and go from there.
Yeah. Do you work in traditional or digital when it comes to coloring?
It's strictly digital. I don't have a big traditional background other than just drawing. Like I've been drawing since I was born, basically. Like my mom, actually for Christmas last year, my dad gave me some drawings. The earliest one was like Kurt 3.5, or 4 years old or something, of like a Spider-Man. You could tell it was Spider-Man. Like, I was like, wow, I can't believe you kept this. But that's my traditional background comes more from like a drawing aspect with just, pencils and erasers and that kind of stuff. I didn't do a whole lot of painting, which I found some colorists find just insane. They're like, the other day, who was it? Kelly Fitzpatrick, I think, is a fantastic colorist, and she was talking about, she mentioned like burnt ochre or something, like as a paint color. I'm like, what? That's brownish, right? Like it's a brown. Like, she's like, what? You don't know? Like, are you serious? And but no, I really started started digital when I as an adult, and I got into color. Like I never went through like a watercolor stage or whatever. So, now I'm, a lot of cases I'm trying to emulate some of those things where I'm trying to fake, watercolor or fake pastels or something. Fake's not the right word. Someone's going to react to that. But yeah, you know what I mean. Like
you're trying to get the same effects of like burning a piece of cork or something and rubbing it on the page.
Right. And I try not to do things that are just obviously digital. Like I try to stay away, at least more recently. I want people to look at it and wonder, like, is this a texture that he just threw on this, or does this actually, like, what did he do? Like, I try to hide my tracks, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, that's how I approach it anyway.
I mean, I like that idea of it. Like, I mean, I think digital certainly opens up the gateway or whatever to doing a lot more at a faster pace, certainly, but
it's less messy.
Yeah,
much less messy.
That too. And
I don't have to wash brushes or keep water on my desk or anything.
Yeah, and you're able to, I guess, do a lot more different effects than you would with a traditional thing, and it's just a matter of like adjusting in Photoshop or whatever. Yeah,
and I love watching guys like what's his name? Kyle Webster, that makes the digital Photoshop brushes. He's doing stuff like people are mixing, and artists are mixing these tools in ways that people never thought to mix traditional tools, or in some cases might be impossible to mix in real life. And so, people are, it's completely entirely, they're creating a whole new medium, really. I mean, to me, and it's impressive in its own way, So yeah.
Cool. How do you approach something like a design, a color design for a character or a monster or what have you? Is that something that's done in collaboration with the artist and the writer, or is it a matter of just like, hey, here's this thing, kind of fill in what you think how it should go?
It really depends on the book. Like there's been books like, we'll take Hack Slash for example, which I'm working on right now, so I would keep bringing it up, but the a lot of the color design as far as costumes and things, like Cassie's new costume, like that was a decision made before I came on, where it's like, this is this, this color and this is this color, and I'm just kind of, I'm working with that. But there's plenty of opportunity in the book where most things don't have an established color. It's not like anyone has a color by numbers thing for, environments or this monster or whatever. For most of the lead characters and things like that I've worked with, a lot of those things might be established already. But when it comes to, the monsters they fight, or, some side character that's really, they're a part of the story, but they, it wasn't that big of a decision for them to make. A lot of people just, they'll leave that to me. Like, hey, do you. And I did a book called Yakuza Demon Killers a couple years ago, and I loved working with those guys because I would do something that I would think was crazy. I'm like, yeah, this is nuts. This is too much. And then you go, no, we want more of this, And so they really just let me go buck wild on that book, and I pretty much had open reign to do whatever I wanted, and it's so much more fun to work that way than, here, stay in this box, which I've been lucky enough to not have that happen very much. But
well, yeah, it's a collaborative medium. That's the whole kind of point to it. Everyone should be contributing in some stretch, and not just, well, do this. This is, come on, art monkey, just do this. Like there's a lot more. You get a lot more out of it, and I think better comics in general when everyone has a say and everyone is contributing something they feel more worthwhile there.
Oh, absolutely, and that's part of the reason why, like, I try to be pretty vocal about credit and about trying to educate readers, and in some cases even reviewers and people that should know better, that write about comics. Like today I saw a review that spoke very, very well about a book that John Rauch had colored, and it was talking about how he was using the colors to affect these moods, and how, Batman scenes had this blue tinge and Batwoman's had this red, and then you would see them fighting and the colors would shift, and this writer is going into all this detail. I'm like, this guy is a unicorn. Like, he actually understands that this colorist wasn't just throwing colors around. Like, he actually understood what the colorist was trying to do. And a lot of people, even, like I said, even industry people that I feel should know better don't help the situation because, either they're not putting colorist names on the covers or they're not mentioning them when they tag their creative team on Twitter, or, those things matter quite a bit. One of the things that I love about working with Tim Steele on Hackslash and like Jim Zub on Glitterbomb was that when they wrote the solicitation material, you're actually allowed to list two names under art. Okay. Most companies don't. They put the penciler's name there, maybe the inker, but usually it's the penciler. And both of those guys they put Steele, who is the artist on Hackslash, and myself under the art section. So my name shows up in the solicitation text. And that seems like a small thing if you're not a colorist, but what that means in reality is, people like yourself, when you do a review, you can see the name. It's right there.
Yeah,
I
can't tell you how hard it is to track down. When that's not listed, it is the hardest thing to find.
You have to have the book, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like you have to be holding it in your hand, or either, get lucky on Twitter and track them down or something.
Yeah.
But they make it far, far too difficult to figure out who's on the team. But I saw this massive difference in just the number of reviews I'm getting tagged in, or the number of mentions on Facebook or whatever, just because people are aware, that, oh, this person worked on this book. And it's getting better. It's definitely better than it was, 5 years ago, but there's a long way to go still, but it's definitely it's headed in the right direction. You've got people that like Jordi Belair, of course, who's very vocal about, colorist visibility and things like that. And so it's definitely something that's improving. And I'm not having to, ask about cover credit as often as I did early on. It's most people are doing it that I'm working with. So, but yeah, I'm glad it's headed that direction though.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is definitely education too, because I can tell you as full disclosure, when I first started reviewing comics, I think I had only put writer and penciler, and then I recognized and then I went on, I was like, no, wait, like I remember seeing, I think, I think what opened my eyes was a few years ago I saw they had a panel at this convention in Manhattan that isn't even around anymore, but Alex DeCampi did this whole bit about pay rates in comics and kind of going through this is how much a writer gets paid versus a penciler, an inker, a colorist, a letterer. And it was why should you pay your colorist? Look at this page. And she showed a page it was an X-Men comic of Cyclops out in space, and it was the pencils. And then he's like, all right, that's the pencils. Now look at what this colorist did. And it was the most magnificent textures and stuff. It was in space. It was just Cyclops floating in space. Before it was just black and white, pencils. And then it was just incredible, things it was the Aurora Borealis was floating through this thing. It was amazing. I was like, oh shit, I'm a moron. I have to put the colorist in here. So now and now it's everybody. So I make sure the letterer is in there, and then that's also
you
tough
do.
to talk
I've noticed
about.
that. And that's something I noticed, and that's why I was happy to come on the show. Is I have noticed in reviews that you've written over the last couple of years, and you've done several books at least that I know of that I've worked on and that I've seen, and you always make a point to do that, and it's appreciated. It doesn't go unnoticed among our colorist community.
I'm glad to hear that.
But it happens all the time where. There's I won't say what it is, but there was some penciled pages of a very popular book right now that got posted, and it's in pencil form, almost unreadable. Okay, you're just standing there holding it at arm's length. You're not going to really be able to tell what's happening, unless you really study it really closely. And you're like, oh, here's a guy, and that's a shadow, and okay, I get it. And people don't realize that, colorist is not there to stay in the lines. They're there to, to clarify that and to get your eye looking in the right places on the page quickly. So when you can look at a page that has 7 panels on it, 8 panels on it, you can jump to all the right points in all of those panels. And people do this subconsciously. They don't know why they do it. It's just, oh, this book's awesome. I'm reading it. They don't realize that, the colorist and obviously to an extent, the penciler inker is involved in that too. But we go a long way to helping make those things readable and make them clearer and add clarity and atmosphere and all those kind of things. So, But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's tough to figure out the best way to even talk about that, because it's like the colors all look good. Like, you know, like you said, like your unicorn reviewer, like I don't even know, I don't know if I would even pick up on that kind of stuff, because like sometimes you can notice it, like what I see an effect a lot that I really like is when there's like a flashback sequence and it's more of a like a sepia toned color, and it's like, okay, it looks like kind of like a faded photograph almost, and it's like, all right, this makes total sense. Like I instantly get the vibe that this is happening in the past. This is not happening right now. Like, you don't even need the captions to say like this happened 5 years ago or something. Like, it just speaks on its own. But sometimes it's tough to explain, like, you know, to put in words. Like, I like the color a lot. Like, everything was really great, but like it's not tough to point that into words.
Oh yeah, like I really don't even blame people that have a hard time writing about it. I truly don't, because I mean, being someone that, you know, has been doing this for a few years, and I teach people how to do it, it's a hard thing to wrap your head around. Like, even for me, sometimes I'll do something, I'm like, okay, this doesn't work, or this does work. Why isn't it working? I don't know exactly, like, or you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of depth, and you could probably get a degree in color theory and not learn it all, you know? And so it's definitely not like I expect every review to go into some crazy detail on some magic the colorist was doing, you know? I mean, I like to see the fact that they even reference if there's a colorist. If I can get a reviewer to do that, I'm happy with them. You know, I don't expect someone to be able to write, you know, dissertations on the color in a book, but because it is hard. There's you know, there's so much there is to know about it, and you can't ever really know it all. So, you know, I'll take what I can get.
and some of it could be implied, or things that like you just kind of think, oh, well, obviously this is why they made this decision, and then you could look at it and go, that wasn't why I made the decision. This guy's way off. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
Yeah, and it's funny too, when the only time that I really find something what I think is negative, but again, it comes down to an education thing, is when people will call out specific things in a review about whether it's mood or it's atmosphere or it's how something was done, and then credit the wrong person for that completely, where it's like, oh man, this penciler really did this amazing work here, and it's like, hey, that wasn't him. You know? So people are going to think I'm just like a crotchety guy complaining about reviews.
No, it's very, very valid.
I'm really not. Like, it's I'm happy that any of my books ever even get a review most of the time. I'm like, hey, this is awesome. Someone read this at least, you know? So, but no, it's something that we do try to talk about it whenever these sort of things come up, because there is such a lack of education on it, you know, even in very broad ways even.
Yeah, but I think, like you said, I think that it is getting better. I think that they're recognizing, you know, more of the colorists are getting credits now on the front of the books, which is like something that wasn't always the case. And then you have folks like Jim Zub and Tim Steele who are putting names on and the solicit information, stuff like it. That's helpful.
They're championing the cause. Yeah, definitely. And the other thing I've noticed too is, and this has been happening for a long time, but a lot of artists, you know, they're drawing things in a way that they know, like, okay, you know, the colorist is going to take care of that. You know what I mean? Like, I know this doesn't work on its own, because the colorist is going to come in and do something to make this panel read, you know? So that really speaks a lot to the collaborative effort, like you said, that a lot of people don't always realize is happening, you know?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you 100% on that. Like, because the tone is, and especially, you know, just tying back to the horror comic angle of it, like, tone is so important when it comes to a horror comic. Like, you can get this like feeling of dread when, like, you see the, you know, the way the shadows work, or like, you know, if something glows really strangely, like that you won't get in a black and white comic. So that is of utmost importance, and, you know, recognizing that it's like, yeah, that's not just the penciler to doing that is a kind of a key factor there.
Yeah, and there's definitely there's definitely pencilers and inkers out there that can work in black and white and do insanely amazing things with it on their own.
But I'm finding that for how many issues? Like,
yeah, but I'm finding that, at least in a lot of the books I've done, that there's definitely a shift toward, you don't see, what we call spot blacks, like a lot of like heavy ink, just black for some artists at all, like that's one of the things I noticed about Ryan Stegman's work on the new Venom, which I know no one's reading that, it's only gone to like 1,000 printings or whatever. It's an amazing book. I've got it. I picked up issue 2 and 3 today at the shop, and you look at Stegman's pencils and, he's kind of old school in that way. Like there's a lot of blacks in there. There's a lot of shadows, and of course it's Venom, so it helps. There's a lot of shadows in Venom books, I would think. But if you look at that in contrast to a lot of other types of artists where everything's very open, it's like they know, okay, the colorist is going to help me here. It'll just be wide open line art, and there's no spot black. So it's more work for the colorist when that happens, and you can end up with a final product's going to look good either way. But I do have an appreciation for artists that still understand that you can do a lot of storytelling, in black and white, before the colorist ever comes along,
Now, do you traditionally, like, I mean, this might sound like a really dumb question, but when it comes to things like the color black, I mean, is that something that's handled by the penciler / inker, or is that something that you would handle as the colorist?
No, colorist very rarely does anything with black. I mean, most of the time, if you see black on a page, whoever inked it put that in there. There's actually in comics, what you'll find is if you've got a dark scene, you're implying that it's dark. Like I can't, if you've got Venom in a black suit in a shadowy alley at midnight fighting, Cloak, you can't color that like it would really be in reality. Like it would be too dark, and that's why you see, you'll see people just leaning toward bluer palettes, and because at night our human eyes tend to see things a little bit bluer than they really are for whatever reason. Don't ask me the physics behind that or the biology behind that. But that's why you'll see a lot of, cooler colors and purples and greens and things being used at night. Now, it's not universal, of course. You can go read Batman books with a red sky and it looks great, but the colors you're using, if you actually, you color pick those in Photoshop, you'll notice they're really not super dark colors. It's just that the palettes that are being chosen are showing that they seem relatively darker compared to some of the other things going on, and so that's always a struggle, especially for a lot of beginner colorists, is they think, oh, this is, it's Batman at night, it's got to be so dark, and like that shit doesn't print. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't print well, like it's not going to come out right. So a lot of times you're implying darkness rather than just doing it very dark,
Yeah, and plus, like, I'm primarily a digital reader, and I mean, I can't tell you how many books I've picked up that I'm like, I can't see this. Like,
I can't tell what's going on.
Yeah, like it's just everything. It's just like, all right, I think there's a person standing in this panel, but like it's just full of darkness. Like it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a very common problem that I've seen from like people that are just starting out coloring, is they just don't realize that you don't really want to be anywhere near the black, or on a book. Like you want there to be a separation where if you've got ink on a page, you don't want your darkest colors getting near that, because then it becomes a muddy mess, Yeah.
Now you mentioned trying to teach others as well. You have a YouTube channel for this, is that correct?
Yeah. I started a YouTube channel 2013, 2014. It's been a while. Early on, I didn't really set out with any sort of like business plan or anything, which is like, I'm going to do some color stuff. I mean, and I didn't even plan on really teaching it when I started. It was, I think the first couple of videos were just, here's how I color, and if you want to play along or watch along with me, have at it. And then I realized, I'm like, yeah, people, they need to learn this, so let me back down a little bit and actually make some tutorials here. And so I started then, and it's still going. It's grown a lot over the last couple of years, and I've added some like more premium options and paid courses and things too, and I have a good time myself doing that. Like my like sinister ulterior motive of all of this is it makes me better. Like like you have to be able to explain things. To really be able to explain something, you have to know more about it than just doing it. And so what I find is, like I'll do something and I'm like, well, this works well, or this doesn't work, or why doesn't this work? And you have to sort of, you got to figure out why to be able to teach that to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's made me better, just being able to have to explain it instead of just being able to do it. So it's fun for me. I have a good time with them.
Well, that's like, I mean, the writers are the same way with it. You have to read a bunch of comics to have an idea of how to writ good comics. You have to have an understanding of that to get in there. So by doing that, and also, I guess, by putting these videos out there, it makes you more accountable and to make sure no, I didn't like this. I'm sure if you went back to your first few videos, you might hate those. Looking at that.
Yeah, it's awful.
The progress that
and they're the ones that YouTube. Oh yeah, and they're the ones that YouTube love to recommend. Like if you search for comic book coloring tutorials, it's going to recommend this 4-year-old video, and it's not bad. I mean it's not terrible, I guess, but of course I've come a long way since then, and there's things I would do differently. And I mean I've even done videos where I do critiques on myself. Like I'll go back and pull an old story I did, and I'm like, and here's why I was crap on this, and explain all that. And I've got a whole playlist on how not to color, and it's 8 or 9 videos I think now of all the crappy things I used to do that I've learned not to do, basically. So yeah, it's all part of the fun.
Now, I guess how quickly do you does it normally take you to color a page?
It varies greatly depending on the page. I would, if I had to pick an average, I would say probably hour and a half, 2 hours maybe. And that's, I don't know, that sounds a little long to me, but yeah, I would say probably hour and a half is a good average. Now that means that there's going to be pages that can happen in half an hour, and there's going to be pages that take 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on what's there. I mean, if you've got some scene with a jillion characters in it and explosions and fire and 1,000 things happening, that's going to be a whole lot more time than 2 people at a water cooler. I mean, so it varies quite a bit from page to page and scene to scene, that kind of thing.
Do you have anything you hate?
And that's pretty fast, I think. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, based on other colorists I've talked to, I think I'm fast, or faster than average, just from asking around. I used to ask the same question. I would meet new other colorists, and how long did this take you? Oh, this page was 6 hours, and this one was 4. And I try to work in a way that gets a lot done with a little. I'm not a big fan of, back in the 90s were a long time ago for, I'm sure, most of this audience, but there was so much just over coloring and over rendering, and hey, Photoshop will let me do this, so I'm going to do it. And I sort of wanted to just revolt against that. So I try to keep things as simple as possible, and render where it matters, instead of just throwing the same highlights on everything and that kind of thing. So, which every good colorist is doing anyway. Mm-hmm. But so sorry, I stepped all over your question.
No, I was going to ask, is there anything you hate to color? Because I've spoken to some artists, and some are like, I hate drawing horses, I hate drawing cars,
horses
or buildings.
And cars, horses and cars are the number 1 and 2. Oh man, for coloring, I guess big crowd scenes can be sort of a pain. It depends on how close they are to the foreground. If your crowd is way off in the background, you can sort of fake it and throw some spots of highlights around. It's it works. Mm-hmm. Or any just interior scenes where there's just tons of stuff in a room, where you're having to change a whole bunch of colors to set it up. A lot of that stuff, though, I think what people look at with coloring and say, oh, I would hate to do this page, there's so much stuff in here. A lot of that work is actually done by the flatter, and I don't know if I need to explain what that is, but the flatter, they're the ones that usually have the biggest difference on a page like that. The time spent from their standpoint is usually a lot bigger than what I'm doing. I can go in and grab selections my flatter has made and still get things done pretty quickly.
Yeah, that was literally my next question. Was do you work with
what is a flatter?
No, do you work with a flatter? Yeah, so the flatter is someone that well, correct me if I'm wrong. Make sure I understand it. They would kind of go in and kind of put some of the color palette down ahead of time. Is that correct? So it's like, all right, there's going to be black here, and like kind of plopping that down, and then you kind of like render it and did I get close to that?
I think you're close. Yeah. So what flatters do are they literally just create selections. Okay. So like for example, your shirt is blue, or your shirt, it doesn't matter what color they use, but they take someone's hair and someone's clothing, someone's skin in the background in the sun, and whatever's on the page, and they just put a color in there. It doesn't actually matter what color it is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of flatters actually work in just completely psychedelic palettes you would never use in a million years, because that's not the point. Like the flatter's not making color decisions.
Okay.
They're just making separations. Because if I need to paint a shirt, if I didn't have a flatter, I would first have to lasso around the edge of the shirt myself, which takes twice as long as it does to actually color it. But what I'm doing when I get the pages in from the flatter, the colors are random. Like they have nothing to do with the final product. What I'm doing is I'm going in and grabbing those selections and then changing them to the colors they're going to be.
Okay.
That's how most general flatters work. So they're not making any creative decisions. It's strictly a technical position because if I had to flatten myself on a page, let's say the flattening takes an hour and then I can render it in 45 minutes. Well, it doesn't make sense for me when, I've got 22 pages to do, and I can send it to someone to get it done for $10 or $15, that all of a sudden the time I have to spend on this page is now cut in half, or cut down to a third, or depending on some of these crazy pages. So it's just a time saver for the colorist, basically. But most flatters, 99% of flatters aren't actually, it's not like they're choosing the colors that are going to appear. They're just any random color. Now there are exceptions to that, I would say, where you have like I know Jordy's worked with like a coloring assistant, which is probably like the next step up from a flatter, I would say. And most people don't work with assistants, but an assistant might actually like my flatter is more of an assistant than a flatter. Like I will send them palettes and say, especially if it's like a new series, I will mark up pages for all of the characters and say, okay, this is their skin tone, this is their hair color, this is what color this costume is. And they'll go ahead and choose those colors for me. And usually for things like backgrounds and things, or I have to do that myself. But if there's things that are going to be repeated within a book, and obviously like the lead characters are, then they might set up some of those colors just to be a little bit of a time saver, on my part. But for the most part, flatters are more of just a technical time saver than doing any creative decision making.
Cool. Thank you very much. My eyes are opened here. Would I guess like someone that wants to be a colorist, would they start with flatting?
I know people that have. I can name a handful. I don't know if it's the best route, because most of the time, obviously, there's no credit involved at any stage. So it's really hard to get your name out there as a flatter. Usually, if you're a good flatter, it's because colorists are talking among themselves, like, "Hey, I'm using this guy, and he's awesome," and good flatters that are fast and reliable are like gold. I mean, and they're known in the colorist community, because it's like, oh, you can trust this guy to not screw you over on a deadline, or you're going to get your pages in when you need them. It's hard to find good people for that. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. You can go to DeviantArt or go to whatever the cool website is for art these days. It's probably not DeviantArt anymore, but there'll be a jillion people offering flatting services, and probably 75% of them are either too slow to do it in a production environment like comics, or, their quality's not good, or whatever, so when you find someone that's like fast and reliable and, you want to hold on to them. I got really lucky early on and found someone just sort of at random, and I've been working with them ever since. It's 5-6 years now.
Cool. That's I'm like fascinated by this because it's an aspect like I don't think it's talked about as much in the comic industry.
It's just so inside baseball. Yeah. Your listeners are like, oh my god, talk about blood again or something.
No, the process thing, like I feel like a lot of the folks that I speak to about the show as well, like are well, it's funny. I grow the show one listener at a time because I'll have someone on the show and they're like, oh, I listened to the show, and I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. Like so.
Yeah,
that's how I end up growing it. So inevitably, though, there's a creator audience that'll listen and they get a lot from the whole process angle of it. So it's like the unsung hero of the colorists world is a good flatter.
Yeah, and the other thing too is take what I'm saying is everything with a grain of salt, because this is what I think about it. You could probably ask 10 colorists some of these questions you're asking me and get 10 completely different answers. Mm-hmm. I mean, from a process standpoint, of course, it's pretty similar. But as far as I think it was Nolan Woodward, is a fantastic Marvel colorist, told me once, like, there's as many ways to color as there are colorists. And I absolutely believe that, there's probably some other colorist listening to this right now going, God, this guy's an idiot. What is he talking about? Don't take my word as gospel. There's a jillion ways to do this job.
So in looking through your credits on Comic Vine, which thank you for sending me ahead of time with this too, just to like double check, like you actually colored one of like the first Kickstarter books that I ever backed, which is Steele Versus, the story of a Mountie hunting monsters, and it was just one of those things like seriously, like probably the second or third campaign I booked. Like I went on there for something. Backed one campaign. I'm like, let me see what else is on here. Then I'm like, this is a Canadian Mountie who fights monsters and shit. Like, yes, here's my money.
It's so underrated. It really was. God. It was such a fun book to do. And I think the first issue of that, I ended up doing 2 Kickstarters. I think for that, for 2 different issues, 2 or 3. I think it's 2.
I think there's been 2, and then I think the creator, like I think his. I think he tried to do another one, and I think it unfortunately just didn't get funding for it. Then I think every so often I get an update for it saying, like, working on this, more's coming. So it sounds like there's still some stuff in the works for it.
Yeah, that's funny that you read that, because that was actually, I just went back and looked myself, and that was the first full issue of anything I ever did that actually got published.
Wow.
That was, I had done something for a digital publishing company, but one issue before that just never saw the light of day. But that was actually the first 22-page book that ever got done that I completed. So that's funny.
Yeah. How did you connect?
I would judge that book very harshly. Probably I went back and looked at it. The coloring, like, oh my god, why did I do that?
How did you connect with the creative team there? Like, if that was your first one out of the gate, how did that happen?
I don't even. It would have had to have been either. There was a Facebook group that I was in early on, like 2012, 2013. I had came across. I think the name of the group, it was small press something, but it was a lot of guys that were just kind of in the same boat I was. They were trying to make it, and there a lot of creators and creator-owned stuff and small press stuff and little ashcan books and that kind of thing, and they had done a Kirby what's the word, like sort of homage tribute type little book, and it was a ton of creators on it doing like little shorts and stuff, and they were all kind of coordinating it in this Facebook group, and at the time it was very small. It was probably 50 or 60 people maybe in this group, and a lot of these guys that I've seen go on to make names for themselves, and I think it was in that group. Don't quote me on that. If they're listening, they might have to correct me. It was either that Facebook group or, it could have been a forum or something somewhere, because at that time I didn't know anyone in comics. Like, I was strictly one of these rando people on the internet trying to find something to color, that might have been the first time I ever got paid, I think. I mean, I had done some pitches and shorts and anthos and different things, I think, before that, previously, but it was just internet. I mean, just came across some guys I was like, hey, you want to make comics? I want to make comics. Let's make a comic, like, So, which I still think is probably one of the best ways to get into comics. People always ask that. So, how do you break in? Like, just find some people in the same graduating class as you are, is what I like to call it. Like, don't go ask Jim Lee to draw your book you wrote, and don't ask, whatever famous colorist to color it if you've never been published before. Like, find someone like in the same boat you are, in the same level you are, and make stuff together. Put it on the internet and see what happens.
Very wise words. Yeah, that's the
and it's, put that up. Yeah, put that in stone somewhere.
It's funny because you can kind of see like these groups develop, like, you can see them like cliques online about like, Twitter or something, that are constantly like working together or like supporting each other's work, and it's like, oh, like that's your class. And then like you can kind of see another one coming up behind them, and then it's like, these fledgling little artists and writers that are like, yeah, we're gonna make this too, and it's like, this is great, like this is such an inclusive community that fosters that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's probably been a year ago now, but Rico Renzi, the colorist, was working on a family tree of colorists, and I don't know how far he got with it, but it was fascinating to see, like, oh, this guy's a student of, the McCabe, old forum, that all these old colorists, they're not old colorists, they're older than me, that met up on some forum 20 years ago, and now they're all, doing huge things together, but you could definitely trace back, like, oh, I studied under this guy, or this guy mentored me, or, I was never lucky enough, I think, to have anyone like that myself. Like, I sort of had to do a lot of figuring things out on my own early on, but you can definitely trace some of the lineage of what's inspired people and what's, how people learn what they're doing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, before you leave the comic industry, you have to pass your coloring knowledge on to the next generation.
Yeah, I guess so.
So, Kurt, this has been really awesome and very, very educational for me too. So I've had a couple of colorists on the show, but you're the first one to be on solo. So usually they're accompanied by the penciler or someone else. I've had Kelly Fitzpatrick and Marie Anger on the show. They're usually with the artists as well. Now. Yeah, so you're the first solo colorist, but I'm happy to chat more with others out there. So if you're a colorist and you're working on horror comics, hit me up certainly. But I want to make sure so people can find you. The best places to find you. You mentioned your YouTube channel. What's that address?
Yeah, so on YouTube, I think how they do the channels now, it's youtube.com/C/K Michael Russell. It's just easier to just search for K Michael Russell on YouTube, and you'll find me there. I have comiccolor.com is like my personal site. Comic Color, spell it all out. And also I have an art school online where I teach coloring and digital art and that sort of thing, and that's at 01artschool.com. So yeah, we got a couple places.
Is that 01?
Either way, honestly, it'll get you there. 01 sounds better, but I actually bought both URLs because I'm like, that's actually 01 digital. Get it? It's clever, right?
Very smart.
So super clever. And so yeah, either one. If you put an O or a 0 in front of it, it'll get you there.
Cool. Yeah, dropping a whole lot of knowledge, not just on this podcast, but out there as well. And then otherwise, the best places for folks to find your work right now, it's still in Hack/Resurrection. Do you have anything else coming up that's been announced yet?
Yeah, Hack/ just issue number 8 just came out today of Hack/Resurrection. It's the start of a new arc, so if you haven't been reading it, like, you'd be fine to start with number 8 through 12. Or that's the new arc, and it was fairly recently announced that I'm working on a book at Top Cow called Infinite Dark. This is Ryan Cady's first creator-owned series. He's definitely been on the up and up the last couple of years if you've followed comics at all. And so this is his first creator-owned, and I don't know when that's coming out. I'm terrible about that sort of stuff. It's going to be a couple more months, but that'll be coming out from Top Cow. And Glitterbombs in trades. If you didn't read that, those are out in trades, and so yeah, I think that's all the latest stuff anyway.
Cool. All right, that about does it then for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson, and my guest K. Michael Russell. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.